Bioshock is in an elite echelon of games. 16 years later, it is still cited as one of the most important titles of the PS3 360 generation. It's considered by many to be the best in the series when compared to its direct sequel and the controversial Infinite, which put the studio behind the series, Irrational Games, into the ground. Still though, the legacy of Bioshock lives on, even in the midst of misguided live service sequels. I have a confession. I never played the original Bioshock. I know, it hurts my gamer cred. So that's why we're going to take a look at the game today and see how well it holds up. We open on a plane. We learn the year is 1960 and assume a first-person perspective as our nameless protagonist looks at a picture of what is, presumably, his family. He then proceeds to speak his only line of dialogue in the entire game.
They told me, son, you're special. You were born to do great things. You know what? They were right.
The plane then proceeds to crash, and we take a swim through the icy Atlantic as bits of plane wreckage float around us. In the distance is a curious-looking tower, seemingly the only bit of shelter out here, so we swim to it. We head inside. The doors slam shut behind us, and a set of lights flicker on to expose a large stone bust of a man and a red banner reading, "No gods or kings, only man." The face bears a striking resemblance to Howard Hughes. The Art Deco architecture in here is striking. What year was this again? 1960? Interesting. We head down a set of stairs to find an open bathysphere. To me, it's a submarine, but the game calls it a bathysphere, so that's what we're going with. We hop inside the bathysphere and are shuttled deep underwater. I gotta say, this is the nicest sub-interior I've ever seen. As we descend, we're presented a slideshow given to us by a certain Andrew Ryan. He looks like the statue we saw before, and by extension, Howard Hughes. This slideshow tells us a lot about Ryan's belief. He sounds radical, but you have to give it to the man. He understands dramatic timing.
I rejected those answers. Instead, I chose something different. I chose the impossible. I chose rapture.
As our sub darts between the towering buildings of Rapture, Ryan further espouses his beliefs and philosophy onto us. He says he built Rapture so there could be a place where the scientist is not bound by morality or the great are not constrained by the small. You know, he's starting to sort of sound like Russian-American author and philosopher Ayn Rand, the founder of objectivism. Wait, Ayn Rand, Andrew Ryan, interesting. It could just be a coincidence. The sub docks, and we can do nothing but helplessly watch as a man gets demolished by a disfigured woman with hook hands. Said disfigured woman then jumps on top of our submarine and attempts to crack our shit open. We can't see what's going on, but we hear an electrical zap, and she jumps off and runs away. The loudspeaker in the sub then cuts on, and Colin Farrell asks us,
"Would you kindly pick up that shortwave radio?"
We pick it up and make our first acquaintance. Oh shit. Is his name Atlas? Okay, the Rand connection is too deep to disregard now. Atlas unlocks the bathysphere for us, and we take our first few steps in Rapture. Immediate observations? There was a snafu, probably caused by Orion, if the picket signs are anything to go by. We stumble our way through the halls, Atlas encouraging us onwards and staving off those hook-handed folks by controlling RC sentry turrets. Now just imagine for a moment you're just some guy traveling over the Atlantic in 1960. The Vietnam War hasn't even happened yet. The plane crashes, and seeking shelter, you stumble upon this ultra-capitalist deep-sea hellscape crawling with Freddy Krueger cosplayers. The cherry on top? You're casually introduced to the concept of automated warfare. What are the implications of such a thing? We continue on our way, picking up our first weapon, a wrench. Someone kicks a flaming couch down the stairs at us, but we dodge it. We follow the assailant, and we taste our first bit of combat. Luckily, this guy doesn't have hook hands, but rather a pipe, just like ours. We take him out pretty easily, and we have this whole plaza area to explore. We make our way to a vending machine labeled Gatherer's Garden, and we see a red vial with an enticing golden sheen enveloping it. For you non-gamers out there, this is the universal symbol of, would you kindly fuck with me? My gamer instinct kicks in and I immediately fuck with it. I'm not prepared for what happens next. Our silent protagonist takes the vial and shoots that shit up at the behest of absolutely no one. We've learned a few things here. First, this guy is probably not too bright. Secondly, we're having our genetics rewired. We lose consciousness as we tumble off a balcony down to the first floor, and in our dazed state, we're set upon by a group of the crazy people here who we now know are called splicers. They're looking for any atom we have on our body, but they're scared away by a quickly approaching thing. Yes, the thing, the mascot of Bioshock, and one of the most endearing figures in 21st century video games. We, of course, know they're called Big Daddies, but at this point in the game, we don't know what they're called yet. We're forced to helplessly look on as this thing and the homely little girl accompanying him observe our body. It seems like the girl is about to stick us with her large needle, but she stops, saying, "I know he'll be an angel soon," and they move on. We eventually regain our faculties, and apparently shooting up was a good thing because we now have force lightning. Bioshock's lesson: insert hypodermic needles into your body without discretion. With our new powers, we're able to short-circuit a door panel, clearing the way forward for us. We walk down a glass hallway that gives a meaty middle finger to the laws of physics. In this next room, we're able to put our new powers to the test for the first time. Shock them, then smack them with the wrench. A simple and effective combo. We move forward to an elevator. As we begin our ascent, Atlas pleads with us to find and save his family. Can we say no? We trudge onwards, and we're introduced to our first firearm, the revolver. So now we right-click to switch between plasmids and weapons, and between our weapons we can choose to select them with their designated number key, hitting shift to open the weapon wheel, or scrolling with the mouse. For now, scrolling with the mouse is the best option to switch between revolver and wrench, but if we get many more weapons, I can see that getting hairy fast. As we make our way into the next area, our suspicions are confirmed. Bad shit went down, but we learn a new tidbit. This shit went down on New Year's Eve, 1958. We handle a pair of splicers by shocking the water they're standing in, and that proves to be pretty effective. Then we meet yet another zombie girl, seemingly detached from her Big Daddy companion. Atlas informs us that these things are called Little Sisters, and they're filled to the brim with Adam. However, Atlas cautions us, saying we shouldn't let our guard down just because she's a little girl. And if he couldn't make it more obvious, he proceeds to say,
Whatever you thought about right and wrong on the surface, well, that don't count for much down in Rapture.
We make our way down from the catwalk, and as we do so, a splicer emerges, and,
Burn. Look at Randy Orton slithering. Watch out, watch out, watch out, watch out!
Holy shit. Unfortunately for him, a Big Daddy decides to show up at that exact moment. Big Daddy wrecks his shit and leaves with the little sister. Gotta say, the devs are doing a great job of presenting the Big Daddies as a serious threat. Moving forward, we have our first run-in with Andrew Ryan. Much like Atlas, he's nothing but a disembodied voice in our two-way radio, but he sends waves of splicers after us while taunting us. He thinks we're an agent working for someone. He hypothesizes the KGB or the CIA. Since we already hit our lifetime word quota on the plane, we can't explain that this is all just a big misunderstanding. He sends a final wave of splicers after us as we escape to the medical plaza. And with that, we've completed the intro. And I have to say, what an intro. Everything from the mysterious tower in the middle of the ocean to the introduction of Ryan's beliefs to the reveal of Rapture, all of it was impeccable. It gets the player very excited for what's ahead. After this, we head into the medical pavilion area. While we've learned all the basic mechanics needed to get by at this point, the medical pavilion teaches us the core gameplay loop of Bioshock, and boy is it a compelling one. For the rest of the game, we'll be set loose in an open area with a core objective, but a lot of little side passages and secret areas are there to explore. Exploring these side areas will reward you with ammo, meds, crafting materials, money, and audio diaries that give you little glimpses into what Rapture was like before the fall. When I booted up Bioshock, I expected the Big Daddies, the compelling setting, the plasmids, and the guns. What I did not expect, however, was just how well all these elements would come together to create an extremely compelling, immersive sim. That wouldn't have been a surprise to me had I done more thorough research before I began playing the game. The studio behind the game is Irrational Games, co-developers of System Shock 2. the follow-up to one of the titans of the pseudo-genre. Once you start putting all the pieces together, the fact that a lead pipe is your first weapon, the fact that you're exploring a location past its prime, the fact that the names of the game share great similarity, it should have been obvious to me from the start, but the pieces didn't really click for me until I was at ground zero, playing the game and having one hell of a good time. To be fair, the fact that I've called Bioshock an immersive sim has probably caused a few people to tap out of this video, and I do think that's somewhat fair. I referred to the immersive sim as a pseudo-genre earlier because it's incredibly contentious as to what makes a game an immersive sim. Even the undisputed forefathers of immersive sims, Deus Ex and Ultima Underworld, are considered first-person role-playing games when you get down to it. So, for those who aren't aware, let's take a step back and define what an immersive sim is. Wikipedia is no help. The first line of the immersive sim entry reads, "An immersive sim is a video game genre that emphasizes player choice." Big help there, thanks. I think writer Ben Stegner put it best in his MUO article on immersive sims, quote, "In one sentence, an immersive sim is a video game that focuses on player agency by offering an open-ended world with emergent systems and consistent rules. While not every immersive sim does this in the same way, the core principles are consistent across the games." End quote. As you can see, it's an incredibly noodly definition, and that's why I previously referred to the immersive sim as a pseudo-genre, because it seems to be tagged onto games in their secondary layer. Let's use Deus Ex as an example. Sure, it has a legacy of being an immersive sim, but if you show someone gameplay of Deus Ex, and you don't tell them what it is they're watching, they'll say, that's a first-person shooter. Now, if they're particularly astute, they might even say, that's a first-person role-playing game. Hell, I'd consider the recent Hitman reboot an immersive sim, and a damn good one at that, but I guarantee you there'd be someone who rebuts with, It can't be an immersive sim, it's not first person." Just go to the Steam page for immersive sims if you want a quick chuckle. No one can make up their damn mind about what an immersive sim truly is, but I can tell you, when I'm playing Bioshock and interacting with all its different systems and subsystems, it is prime modern immersive sim material. From the bevy of plasmids that all have different use cases, to the way you can build out your character with different tonics and plasmids to focus on certain damage types, to the hacking system, there are so many different ways you can manipulate the world of Rapture. Hack a med station so that it poisons an enemy rather than heal them when they go to use it. Mind control a Big Daddy to do your bidding. Stealth your way around the maps, getting the drop on splicers before they even know you're there. These are all viable options, but I don't hold the opinion that all of these elements were realized to their fullest potential. Take hacking, for instance. Hacking is an option, but not really. It is incredibly useful, serving as a way to lower prices in shops, and a way to turn the plethora of surveillance cameras and turrets scattered around the various maps to your side. You can ignore the hacking system entirely, but you're going to have a bad time if you do. At first, the hacking system isn't so bad. The puzzles are relatively simple, not taking too much of your time. That effect is only exacerbated if you equip the tonics that make the puzzles even easier. However, as you go into the mid and late game, the hacking puzzles get increasingly difficult, and I came across a few that seemed to be legitimately impossible. Even so, I attempted hacks on almost every machine I came across, as the benefits of hacking a rocket turret or a security camera are just too great to ignore. On the other side, you have combat. The plasmids present a great variety of playstyles, and as you start to accumulate different ammo types for your 7 different weapons, you'll quickly find yourself having a great deal of options for whatever challenges Rapture may throw at you. A player who successfully utilizes all of the options given to them will find themselves having a pretty easy time, even on hard difficulty. The problem is, accessing all the different options given to you is an incredible pain in the ass. On the plasmid side, every power is bound to a function key. That is not ideal. The weapons are bound to 1 through 8. That's fine for the weapons bound to the 1 through 4 keys, as in normal FPS affair, but going past that, you have to really stretch to get to the weapon you want. You can use the scroll wheel to switch weapons, but after you get more than a handful, this option becomes impractical as well. The best option I found to switch between all the weapons and plasmids was the weapon wheel, but there are even a few problems with this. Just like hacking, it breaks the flow of gameplay. One in isolation isn't the worst, but when the weapon wheel and hacking are combined, the player is constantly breaking their forward momentum. Secondly, the plasmid symbols can be pretty abstract, and until you memorize them, you have to hover over your plasmids to see what power you're selecting, which takes even more time. Besides the clunky interface, Bioshock's combat is held up fine, weapons are a bit floaty, but the ragdoll physics make for some great player feedback. Again, it's not necessarily the execution of Bioshock's combat that's impressive, but rather the freedom it affords the player. And here's where I take a few steps back, because I just spent all this time justifying my prescription of the immersive sim to Bioshock, just for me to go back on my word and say that I think Bioshock would be better described as an immersive sim light. The main reason for this is because unlike the more classic immersive sims, you don't really have much effect on the narrative here. Typically in immersive sims, your playstyle somewhat enforces the outcome of the story. In Dishonored, playing a vengeful, bloodthirsty Corvo will affect the world around you and the game's subsequent conclusion, whereas sparing as many lives as you can will reflect a relatively brighter Dunwall, if you could call it that, while also netting you a better ending. Here in Bioshock, the narrative is the narrative. You've got no input on how the story here plays out, except for in one way. There are multiple endings, but the only metric your ending is determined by is whether or not you choose to save or harvest the Little Sisters. At the end of the medical pavilion level, you come across a defenseless little sister, her Big Daddy companion seemingly absent. Atlas urges you to harvest the little girl for her Adam because, as we learned earlier, they're chock full of the stuff. However, a German woman appears from the balcony. Her name is Dr. Tenenbaum, and if you've thoroughly explored the aforementioned medical pavilion, you'll have already gotten some of her backstory. Up to this point, we know Tenenbaum is a German Jew who was captured by the Nazis in World War II. She was taken to a prison camp where her family was killed, but she was spared and promptly put to work as a medical assistant, where she quickly discovered science and medicine were her calling. She somehow ended up in Rapture, and it seems like she has some sort of vested interest in these little sisters. She says if we save the little sisters instead of harvesting them, she'll make it worth our while. Now, I'm going to be completely honest. It doesn't make a lick of sense to harvest the little sisters. Keep in mind, I'm not discussing the morality of the decision, but rather the math of it all. But let's not get into the numbers yet. Let's get into what the game is trying to say here. I said earlier that I had suspicions that Andrew Ryan was a stand-in for Ayn Rand. After digging around the internet, that suspicion was confirmed. Rand is known for founding the philosophical school of objectivism. Rand describes the philosophy as, quote, the concept of man as a heroic being, with his own happiness as the moral purpose of his life, with productive achievement as his noblest activity, and reason as his only absolute. Let's read between the lines here. Objectivism is all about self-interest, selfishness. The Ayn Rand Institute embraces this. Ayn Rand believed that capitalism was the only just economic system, and not the capitalism practiced in America today. She wanted straight, pure, unregulated capitalism. Today, she'd be known as a libertarian, and when I say libertarian, I don't mean the edgy 14-year-old who wears tuxedo t-shirts and just discovered Ron Swanson. I mean a true libertarian.
Should someone have to have a government-issued license to drive a car?
Hell no!
What's next? Requiring a license to make toast in your own damn toaster?
The license to drive? You know, I'd like to see some competency exhibited by people before they drive.
Okay, so now we know the basis of objectivism, and that was just a crash course, very surface level reading of the philosophy. Disclaimer, I am not an expert on this subject. I'm an attention-seeking whore with way too much free time on his hands, so please don't take my word on all this as gospel. For another touchpoint, Mr. House from New Vegas would fall mostly in line with Andrew Ryan's philosophy, and by extension, Rand's. If we look into this moral conundrum, to kill or not to kill this little girl, pure objectivist view would say, go for it, you need the atom to survive, she has it, kill her. This is the idea the game is exploring, but it doesn't do it very effectively. You see, you still get Adam from saving the little girl. And Tenenbaum says that if you save the sisters, she will, quote, make it worth your while. If someone comes up to me and says, hey man, I currently have someone hostage and you decide their fate. Either they live and you get a Honda Civic, or they die and you get a Bugatti. What will it be? I don't deserve a pat on the back for sparing the person for a Honda Civic. This isn't a compelling choice. Sprinkle on top that Tenenbaum has a carrot waved in front of our face with the mysterious, "I'll make it worth your while" line, and yeah, I just don't see how this choice is all that compelling. And once you dig into it, it's the best choice to make, even when you break the numbers down. You see, for every 3 little sisters you save, Tenenbaum gives you a gift of bonus atom, a free plasmid, and a 3rd random item. For every 3 little sisters you harvest, you get 480 atom. For every 3 little sisters you save, you get 440 atom when counting the gift. There are 21 total little sisters in Rapture. If you kill every little sister, you get 3,360 atom. If you save every little sister, you get 3,080 atom. That's not even a 300 atom difference. And keep in mind, by saving the little sisters, you get 7 free plasmids you would have otherwise had to pay for. And the cost of those plasmids can range anywhere from $30 all the way up to $120. So yeah, this little sister conundrum sort of fails on every level. It's not a compelling choice, and the short-term benefits of harvesting the little sisters aren't even as strong as advertised. A more compelling choice would be either kill the little sisters for atom, or save her for no atom. That's of course just a band-aid solution and doesn't account for the ripple effects it would have on the rest of the player experience, but hey, at least it's a start. If the player took the high road here, it might make the experience unreasonably difficult, but I sincerely doubt that because the game is pretty trivial as it is. A lot of the game's trivial difficulty can be boiled down to the Vita Chamber system. When you die, you don't return to a previous save state. You get recreated from the last Vita Chamber you passed by. When you emerge from the chamber, the world is exactly as you left it. All hack devices remain that way. All wounded enemies retain their health. You, however, sacrifice nothing. No money, no supplies or equipment. In fact, many times, these Vita Chambers will have a shop just around the corner, so you can be sure you're stocked back up to head out into the fray once more. I do love that death and respawning are contextualized within the world. However, this system, as you might imagine, makes the game trivially easy. If you ignored every upgrade in the game, and somehow made it to the endgame with tougher enemies with higher health bars and more severe damage multipliers, you could still brute force your way by way of this system. The under-equipped player will engage the enemy, shave off 20% of their health bar or so before they're killed. The player will then respawn in the Vita Chamber and be able to walk back to the enemy, taking off another 20% of their health before the player themselves are killed. They can rinse and repeat this arduous process for the entire game. And if you go broke, no problem. You've got your handy wrench to whack away with. This Vita Chamber system takes all of the stakes out of the game. There is no punishment for death. It's a shame because the atmosphere of Rapture is so dire and oppressive. It seems like a dangerous place until you get in there and realize there's a severe lack of consequences for screwing her up. Rapture is all bark, no bite, and unfortunately, that extends to the Big Daddies. The little sister outside of the medical pavilion is the only freebie in the game you get. From here on out, if you want their precious atom, you'll have to first defeat their hulking guardians. I have to say, the way the game builds these things up is masterful. From seeing the first as you ride into Rapture to the way you see one absolutely destroy a splicer after it messes with its little sister, to their menacingly outstanding costume design. They're so well done, and I was simultaneously looking forward to and dreading the moment I would have to face one myself. After I did, I was pretty unimpressed with the whole affair. Turns out they're just bullet sponges. They don't possess any unique traits from the other enemies in the game. They're just souped up splicers with deadly speed, strength, and accuracy. I do love how the Big Daddies are neutral to you when you come across them. That somehow makes them and the Splicers more grounded in this world. The Splicers have lost their sanity, but the Big Daddies have a mission, and as long as you don't interfere with that mission, you'll be a-okay. As soon as you begin engaging with them, though, it's business as usual. If you're thoroughly exploring all the options you have as a player, you can discover a way to trivialize the Big Daddies even further. Electricity. Specifically, electric gel found in the chemical thrower you get about midway through the game. If you have a sufficiently upgraded thrower, you can stun-lock the Big Daddies with electric gel for their entire health bar. Big Daddies, when you boil it all down, are just uninteresting bullet sponges, and that's a real shame. There aren't any interesting decisions to make when facing off against one. Just throw lead into it until it dies. Now, I just spent a lot of time criticizing elements of the game, and as such it may come off as if I didn't enjoy my time with Bioshock, but that couldn't be further from the truth. While Bioshock does have some flaws, what's allowed it to hold up all these years later is the incredibly captivating setting and story. Nearly every level in Bioshock is memorable in one way or another. from the naturalistic beauty of Arcadia all the way to the brilliance of Fort Frolic, which may just be one of the finest levels ever put in a first-person shooter. Your arrival at Fort Frolic marks the halfway point of your journey through Bioshock. As you arrive, you lose contact with your guide, Atlas, and are left to the whims of a certain Sander Cohen. Cohen was the leading figure of Rapture's art movement, and like most who are still left after the fall of the city, he has gone completely insane. Fort Frolic was Rapture's entertainment district, and you'll explore this area at the behest of Cohen, looking for his previous pupils in order to kill them and take a picture of them so Cohen can frame it in his next big art project. Fort Frolic is the pinnacle of Bioshock. In the rough hour or so you'll spend here, all of the game's systems and subsystems will come into focus for what is a truly dazzling great bit of immersive FPS gameplay. It's just the right amount of unsettling as you maze your way through all the sculptures of splicers, who you later learn are real and petrified in place. All the different shops and apartments you weave in and out of provide a great deal of variety and context for the setting of Rapture. It is Bioshock at its best as a game. Bioshock reaches its height as a story right before you come to face with Andrew Ryan. I was apparently very lucky to never have Bioshock's twist spoiled for me, and it is truly great, so if you wish to experience it for yourself, I implore you to skip to the timestamp displayed on the screen. It turns out, Atlas was not your friend at all, and in fact, his name isn't even Atlas. It's Fontaine, a character you've been hearing about since the first level of the game. Fontaine is Andrew Ryan's foil through and through. Fontaine is largely responsible for the downfall of Rapture, as he is the one who discovered and subsequently monetized Adam, which in turn drove all the splicers insane. I find it so interesting that Fontaine is the man that ultimately heralded the downfall of Rapture, because he epitomizes the type of person Ryan designed Rapture for. A self-made man who could pave his own way. Fontaine planned to con Rapture from the start, first through a contraband smuggling ring, but then he happened upon the power of Adam, and subsequently founded Fontaine Futuristics, through which he was able to mind control the splicers into doing his bidding. For the players who bought into Andrew Ryan's philosophy, they find it hard to come to grips with the fact that Andrew Ryan's idea of an ultra-capitalist utopia is ultimately criticized by the developers. A defense of Ryan I've seen online is that it was his abandonment of his objectivist values that led to the downfall of Rapture, not his embracement of them. In a certain way, this is true. After Fontaine was apparently killed in a shootout against Ryan's goons, Andrew took ownership of Fontaine Futuristics and promptly shifted it from the private sector to the public sector. Andrew Ryan was now facilitating big government, a move that did not go over well with Ryan's closest allies. A civil war then broke out a few short months later within Rapture, spurred on by the once-thought-dead Fontaine, now known as Atlas. During this period of turmoil, one of Ryan's chief medical researchers, Dr. Suchong, approached Ryan with a potential solution to all this madness: mind control. Using the pheromones found in plasmids, Ryan could perhaps forcibly pacify the disgruntled citizens of Rapture through mental suggestion. This, however, would be the ultimate betrayal of Ryan's philosophy. To take away a citizen's free will? That would go against everything he stood for. However, Ryan, seeing no other way out, gave the green light. In doing so, Atlas was forced to use his ace in the hole: you, the player. So it is true that Ryan abandoned the philosophies he used to found Rapture, and in doing so, he may very well have caused the city's subsequent downfall. However, there's just one problem with this argument. Something like this could have only happened in Rapture. Frank Fontaine was a grifter through and through, and he had been grifting well before he discovered Rapture. In his surface life, Fontaine ran a booking operation rigging boxing matches. During this time, he was investigated by the FBI, but he was no more than a cockroach in the grand scheme of things. However, amongst the uber-free market of Rapture, that cockroach was given a chance to grow into something that is not so easily squashed by a boot. Fontaine was a shithead before he discovered Rapture. It just so happens that Rapture serves as the ultimate nautical incubator for shitheads to flourish. Ryan built Rapture for exceptional individuals to succeed, to enjoy the fruits of their labor. The critical flaw with Rapture was that it also served as a place for exceptionally terrible individuals to succeed, and Rapture had no measures in place to distinguish between the two. So this exceptionally terrible individual, Atlas, aka Fontaine, had been mind-controlling you from the start. You're the illegitimate son of Ryan, captured by Fontaine and subsequently conditioned to obey any order that proceeds the phrase,
"Would you kindly get this? Would you kindly find that? Would you kindly find that? Would you kindly find it? Would you kindly get this? Would you kindly head to Ryan's office and kill the son of a bitch?"
The truth was, the plane crash was planned. Every step you took was predetermined by Fontaine. If you expected a grand boss fight against Andrew Ryan, think again. Agency is taken away from the player as Ryan forces you to beat him to death with a golf club through the use of your mental conditioning. It's a twist that not only lands narratively, as on a replay you can see multiple cases of foreshadowing, but also on a gameplay level. I remarked earlier how freeing and open Bioshock's gameplay was. That still holds true, but in doing so, the developers are slyly saying, you don't have as much agency as you think you do, huh? And that's entirely true. If this were another game, your goal would be to get the hell out of Rapture, not venture deeper into it to save some unknown person's wife and child, just for the goalpost to shift after their demise. Yet we, as the players, went along, because that's what it is to play a video game. To have this blending of narrative and gameplay was truly an astounding achievement for the time. And it has been reattempted many times since, including Irrational Games themselves in Bioshock Infinite. Yet it never hits quite as hard as it does here. While Fort Frolic may be the pinnacle of Bioshock as a game, this moment here is the pinnacle of Bioshock as a story. And it's perhaps the biggest reason the game is still remembered so fondly today. The biggest problem with Bioshock is that it continues after this. After killing Ryan, you are mind-controlled into giving Fontaine control of the city. Luckily, Tenenbaum is there to save you, and you escape with the assistance of the Little Sisters. I know I harped on the ineffectiveness of the Little Sister conundrum earlier, but I have to say that this moment makes me happy I chose to save the sisters, independent of the mechanical advantages it brings. To see them running and playing, being normal children, made me feel that I had left Rapture in a better place than I had found it, even though I just gave control of the city to a madman. For the rest of the game, you'll be working with Tenenbaum, tasked with the objective of freeing yourself from Fontaine's control. The game does some interesting things here in this final act, like reducing your health and randomizing your plasmids, but the game really starts to lose steam at this point. The narrative has already reached its crescendo, and to go back to the normal gameplay loop in, might I add, a couple of the game's more lackluster levels, really makes this final third of the game land with a flop. The most interesting thing the game has you do at this point is assume the role of a Big Daddy, a concept which they would go on to flesh out in the game's direct sequel. Bioshock ends with a thoroughly mediocre fight against Fontaine, in which you of course win. Since I saved all the Little Sisters, I got a heartwarming final cinematic, and the curtains close on Bioshock. And what a ride it was. That lackluster final act can oftentimes leave the departing player with a twisted notion of their perception on the game. It certainly was that way to me. It was only after a period of reflection and separation from the game that I realized how much of a blast I had with the game's systems and its setting. Bioshock is not perfect. It makes many missteps, and as the kids would say, fumbles the bag in many departments. The fact that its legacy has endured in spite of all that is testament to just how special of an experience it is. I've played games that are much smoother, games that provide the player a more even and consistent experience. Most of those games don't hold half of the cranial real estate that Bioshock possesses within my mind. Over a decade later, few video game settings are as captivating as Rapture is. Few games possess the narrative chops to set up and deliver an effective twist in the way that Bioshock did. The makers of Bioshock, Irrational Games, exist no longer. They unfortunately had to shutter their doors after the horrific and costly development cycle of Bioshock Infinite. Even though Irrational Games is now defunct, the legacy they've left upon the industry with the release of Bioshock is many times greater than most development outfits can hope to achieve. They're long gone, but Bioshock will always be the shining jewel of their legacy. Much in the same way that the now defunct hallways and corridors of Rapture are the final reminder that Andrew Ryan entered this world and made something great, even if he was extremely misguided while doing so. Thanks for watching.